Hello, welcome everyone to Working Effectively with Your Child's School Advocacy Strategies. So in this module, we're going to be looking at what will help you pursue an inclusive education by understanding the challenges in building partnerships and what you as a parent can do to help build an effective relationship, and some tried and true advocacy tips with a focus on helping you to become a more effective advocate. So if we think about, staying true to the inclusive education path, what helps parents successfully pursue inclusive education is, as we mentioned in modules 1 and 2, being clear about the vision. But it's also really important that we're realistic about school systems, otherwise we're likely to be constantly frustrated and not that constructive. It helps to have both skills and some helpful beliefs to build a partnership. Some of those beliefs would include that your child has value and every right to belong, and that you as a parent have a natural authority to be their voice. Another helpful belief might be that relationships take effort. So it helps to keep learning about advocacy, and it also helps to be well informed about policy and legislation. So some of these things we've discussed in other modules, but I just wanted to put them up as a bit of a summary for us. So the challenges in building partnerships, and this is not an exhaustive list, but some common ones. Schools are busy places, and sometimes they lack the time to prioritise relationships, which can leave families frustrated, but it is just a reality. I think it's important to recognise that we all bring different assumptions and histories to the home-school partnership. If we've felt unwelcomed or offensive things have been said about our child, we're likely to take a certain defensiveness into subsequent conversations. And teachers will too if they've had experiences of feeling attacked. We are that one parent or child, we have one child in the class. They're the most important thing to us. Teachers have a lot of parents and kids that they need to interact with. So again, that's a reality that we need to be kind of conscious of in our expectations. Unfortunately, families of students with disability do accumulate experiences of not being welcomed, of having their child's support needs not adequately addressed, and so families can feel already marginalised and disempowered. Because of that, I think we as family advocates need to guard against being really reactive. So we don't want to be that angry advocate. We need to think about advocacy in a strategic way, about how we can present our case that's most likely to be successful for the outcome that we want. So this means that we need to be vigilant, because schools won't always get things right. But we need to be careful about not micromanaging the school. So we need to be respecting that teachers are professionals who do have expertise and knowledge, and they're not going to, it's not going to lead anywhere positively if we're kind of up there all the time or sending countless emails that are trying to tell the school how to do their job. It's not to say that we can't legitimately raise concerns or talk about our goals and priorities, but we need to do that in a way that isn't micromanaging the school. So because it's a complex thing, there is a challenge for all of us as family advocates in working out, is this a big issue that I need to talk up about? Is this a little issue, but one that if I don't address now is likely to kind of lead us somewhere that I don't want to be? Is this something that in speaking up now will potentially get the school a bit defensive? So we need to be thinking about, what issues need addressing, and also how we will do that to preserve the positive relationship that we want to build. So I think about the relationship between home and the school is like any relationship, where the first thing you need to do is communicate about what that relationship should look like, what's going to make it comfortable and workable for both parties. So talk about, early in the school year, how often you'll communicate and what that will look like. So doing that will help you not be that person sending countless emails every day, or it might be helpful for you as well to be upfront that it's not going to be great for you if the school calls you every time that there's a problem. So just negotiate about the amount of contact and the means of that contact. See a point there is, which is not about agreeing straight away to anything that the school suggests. Now, that's really about saying you have that natural authority as your child's parent, and it's really important that you claim that authority and give yourself the thinking time to make decisions, rather than just being yes, whatever the school proposes, I'm okay with that. Maybe this is an opposite point, that you don't want to be the person who kind of ambushes the school to try and force a decision, or it's kind of immediately on the front foot when there's something that's disappointing that's happened. So just as we as parents don't want to be ambushed, we don't want to do that back to the school. And we don't want to escalate things really quickly. So you're not going to a current affair or to the education minister the first time there's a problem. You're trying to work that through at the teacher level, at the principal level, etc. Otherwise, your advocacy is going to backfire a lot. Rather than always being ready to criticise, many people have found it helpful to take a curious approach. So ask the school more about why they're proposing a particular thing. That can give you some thinking time, and it can also help you to really understand the school's perspective. Not always to agree, but to understand it more fully rather than dismissing it out of hand. And always, always, always model being a problem solver. So learning to say, how can we figure this out together? So to be an effective advocate, you need that vision that we've talked about, and you need to take the time to reflect and plan. You need to be crystal clear about your family authority, your natural authority. You need to know yourself. So if you're someone who is very emotional and likely to get really kind of angry and worked up at a meeting, you need to take along someone to those meetings who can kind of help you to stay calm. And you can do some preparation as well to help that. Similarly, if you're someone who actually loses their voice in a situation where they feel that there's a lot of people with a counter position, you can do the preparation to make sure you've got your list of topics that you want to be addressed, and you can rehearse to make sure you're more confident. Building your own support network is very valuable. So it's one of the things that certainly helped me as a parent to stay the course of advocacy. And from that, knowing other parent advocates, I actually learned what are the things that are kind of likely to be said in school meetings at particular ages and stages. So I was really able to anticipate some of the arguments that I would face, and to have my script or my counter arguments ready. And this, my last one, might sound a bit twee, but we've already covered it in other modules. Rehearse. Practice. Practice saying your vision out loud. Practice, asking for the biggest priority for your child. Practice talking about their strengths. So, Before you go into any advocacy situation, adopt your advocacy stance. Now, this is something about being calm, confident, centered, knowing that you've got a right to be your child's voice. It's not about being that aggressive and angry advocate, and it's not like being a, oh, could I please, begging kind of approach, or, so the difference between kind of being a twig that's easily pushed over and someone who's kind of overbearing, kind of scary. So the advocacy stance is strong and confident and direct. But even if you've done that, it's very helpful to have someone there in important situations like school meetings. So having someone who's a witness, having someone who can take some notes, having someone who can ask for a break if things are getting, feels like things are spinning around and not being that productive. It helps to always remember that to stay focused on the interests of your child, not to get caught up in personality conflicts or kind of winning, but what is going to be in your child's best long-term interest. So that also means not selling them out. It also means, sticking to your guns when things that are offered to you are not good enough, and going back and being a good ambassador for them. The way you're doing that, I guess, is by speaking positively and enthusiastically rather than always being there to criticise. As we've already talked about in other sections, if you're able to inspire people to contribute to your child's vision, that's probably the most effective thing that you can do as an advocate. Trying to inspire people, for them to get excited about doing better. So one of the things in terms of planning is to be really clear about what you want and what you will and won't compromise over. There'll always be some things that you just have to compromise over, some things that are, not as good as you'd hoped, but perhaps are the best outcome you can get in the circumstances. But it's also really important to be clear about the things that are just not acceptable. So in my son's case, in high school, he was being offered work experience in a sheltered workshop, and I said, sounds a bit dramatic, but over my dead body is Sean going to work in a sheltered workshop, because that was my bottom line. That was not in line with our vision, and that was just something that was completely unacceptable to me. So you may not have to voice it that directly, but it's important for you to know in your own mind what is and isn't negotiable. Even if you try to be that kind of inspiring advocate, you won't win everyone over. So that's unrealistic. Not everyone will get what you're about. So I think as all that you're trying to do, which is the final point there, is to make sure that you're above reproach in demonstrating respect and reasonableness. So you're always speaking respectfully, your communication, you've read those emails or those letters to make sure there's not an angry, aggressive tone, and that you're always showing appreciation to the people who've been supportive. Advocacy does require you to be organised. So prepare well for meetings, take notes, have a paper trail. Sometimes that's easy when you've got kind of emails coming in. You can go back and look at dates, but having some organised folders for emails wouldn't hurt. But sometimes phone conversations or, sometimes it can be harder. So I'd really recommend anything that's not kind of by correspondence, that you have a little notebook where you write down the dates and, who the meeting was with and what was promised, for example. And that you take your own minutes of any formal meetings as well, so you have your own record. So that's a very, very quick overview of advocacy, but I want to give you a message that you can get better at this. I learned a lot of things along the way. And these might be some of the things that you want to practice. So it might be helpful for you to practice just dealing with one thing at a time rather than having a list of 25 things that you'd like to have changed from the one meeting. And working out, the clearest and most direct way to ask for what's most important to you. You might be able to practice some lines about being solution focused and practice that I language, that assertive approach. Practice some curious questions and come up with some strategies about how you're going to remain calm and factual. Think about the people in your school and who might be an ally that you can develop a stronger alliance with. And thank and praise the people who are supporting your vision. And so finally, I want to encourage people to kind of do some of their own individual reflection about an unhelpful habit that they might have, or a helpful habit that they would want to continue to build upon, something that they'd like to rehearse, a tricky conversation, and their own goals for improving their communication and keep learning and developing as an advocate. So it could be that, you got a gap in understanding policy and legislation, or, the I statements don't come naturally to you, or your vision needs a bit more work, or you haven't really thought about those bottom lines. So really just encourage you to think about the knowledge and the skills that you might want to develop. And I wish you all the very best. There's a really good video on our website about advocacy learnings from Queensland families that I really encourage you to watch as well. Thank you.
So one of the mistakes I made, out of many, would have been to trust that inclusion would happen naturally once I had shared my vision with school staff and they were on board and they had agreed to inclusion on principle.
I thought, oh well, they know how to do education, the school, so we all understand that we want him included and that they would be able to figure out how to do that, but sometimes it didn't actually look like what I thought it should, and that I did have to have some conversations, and so that we're all on the same page.
So in the early years, I think I just thought that change would happen if I was really nice to people. So I really backed down from the difficult conversations when I saw that Sean was maybe being removed from the classroom or sitting with the teacher aide. I didn't really want to tackle it, or I was just too subtle in my messages. And what I found was that sometimes you need to be quite clear about what you want to see, because people don't necessarily understand what inclusion is.
In advocating for Eliza, that really started in the medical space, and that's where I learnt all the hard lessons. So the hard lessons for me were, I always assumed that people would do a good job because it was the right thing to do. Unfortunately, that has not always been the case. And so I learnt that I needed to ask questions. I needed to probe as to why they were doing certain things. Was that the best thing for Eliza, or was that the easiest thing for them to do?
I think worrying about everything all at the same time is a big problem for many parents, and I certainly had that, and I think I've definitely had times where they felt like there were 20 different issues to deal with, and I learnt to write them all down and to prioritise which ones were the absolute most important right now that seemed realistic to be able to solve and would have the most positive impact on Millie's life.
First of all, I like to reinforce the positives, what they're doing great for our family and for my son, and then go into and acknowledge the staff that have been involved in that, if that's relevant, and then bring up, the most pertinent points that I really want to talk about.
I would never go to any meeting at school on my own. It is so helpful to have another person with me who understands the situation and also cares deeply for Liam.
And plan before you have those conversations. Go in with a goal and stick to that goal and keep coming back to that goal until you can actually get there and find a solution.
One thing I've found useful with the school was to give them 1 or 2 guiding principles to help them make decisions when situations are a bit more complex. So when they're not sure if they should do this or that, one of the guiding principles is not to take my son out of class and into the educational unit. So I say, let's find a solution that you would find for any child without a disability. What would you do? You would not take him away from class, or what can we do that doesn't entail that strategy?
Yeah, I take in some notes so that I don't forget the major points that I want to make during our meeting.
I found it really valuable to always go into formal meetings with a plan of what I wanted to achieve from the meeting, to anticipate what some of the counter arguments would be, and even to rehearse what I wanted to say, so that in the situation, which often felt really emotionally charged, I would have the words ready to speak rather than feeling really emotionally caught off guard.
I need to remember at all times this is about my child, not about me as an adult. And that can be really difficult, particularly if people are questioning your parenting.
When emotion comes into it, that can be really, really hard to figure out. So I think being really logical and talking to others. If you don't have a partner you can talk to, then having a great friend or a family member, someone you can rely on to be able to talk it out.
I have used myself the principles around non-violent communication when I think of my interactions in advocacy situations. So thinking clearly about the preferred outcome I would like from the interaction, and also the non-violent communication principles, which are really about weighing your words and choosing the words you use, understanding that they can either contribute to connection or to distance.
If it's a problem as such, work towards a solution, asking them their ideas, using the curious approach to draw them in to ask them why and what they see might be some solutions.
I sometimes joke about me being Eliza's PR person, and that goes to how do I talk about her? What stories do I share that help people understand her? Because Eliza is non-verbal. What language do I use when I'm talking about some of the more difficult stuff? So not being a Pollyanna about things, but talking about her in the way that I want them to see her.
I've become a better advocate the more I stay grounded that it is my son's absolute right to belong, that he is important and valuable, and that I need to embrace my role, I guess, as his voice in situations where he can't speak up for himself. So I guess I feel that enables me to feel courageous in situations which I would rather avoid.
I find that advocacy is something that I do every day. The intensity of it waxes and wanes, but it's a daily commitment, and it requires vigilance on my part.
Stay connected with others who are pursuing an inclusive education or have pursued an inclusive education for their child, so other parents that really appreciate and understand the importance of all children being included. That's just something that has been hugely beneficial for me.